coming on the air officially on verdict watch because the jury is deliberating as we speak about Alex Murdaugh behind closed doors, answering the question based on the evidence. Did he murder his wife and son? With his lawyers making one last push tonight. Listen.
There are two words that justice demands in this case, and those two words are not guilty.
We have an NBC News exclusive coming up right here. A look inside the jury room and new reporting from our team sources on how long those jurors could be there tonight. Plus, right now we are tracking a possible tornado outbreak down south, what could be a bad one. Our team is on the ground in Dallas, where thousands of people are facing that threat. That's not all we're tracking. There's also a potential measles outbreak after one of the biggest gatherings of Christians in decades in Kentucky. What the CDC wants you to know tonight. Plus, a stunning, never-before-seen look at what it's like to be a player in the world's richest sports league, how rats in an NFL locker room and players' wives breastfeeding on the floors of public bathrooms are apparently not unusual for some teams. And the new report gets into the degrading and offensive allegations being made against the creator of Euphoria, Sam Levinson, and the music star The Weeknd on the set of their upcoming HBO show. We'll tell you more about it later on in our show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and the next time we see Alex Murdaugh in court, it'll almost certainly be to find out whether he's guilty or not of killing his wife and son, something he denies, and what's being called the trial of the century in South Carolina. The jury deliberating now after the final arguments from both sides. And let's start with the prosecutions. The main point that they're leaving the jury with, there's a few of them. They say it's important to remember that Murdaugh, in their view, corroborated lies that he's told, acknowledged lying more than once to police over the last year and a half. The state's making the point that it defies logic to think it could have been anyone else, based on the evidence that Alex Murdaugh is the only one who could have murdered Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. That they can't answer every question because those key eyewitnesses, of course, have been killed, but that Alex Murdaugh is the only one with the weapons, the opportunity, and they say the motive, malice. With Murdaugh looking to find any way out of the so-called storm of financial pressure that he faced, saying these shootings were not an accident. Listen.
I think he loved Maggie. I think he loved Paul. But you know who he loved more than that? You know who he loved more than that? And who he's going to make sure that that life, wanted to make sure that life, he loved Alex. And he exercised his greatest power of choice to make sure that life continued.
The defense, however, is hoping that these points stick better with the jury. They say the South Carolina State Police mishandled evidence in the crime scene. The defense argues there's a real question mark around motive and no direct evidence, like the fact that nobody knows where the murder weapon is. As for why Murdaugh lied, they point to his, in their words, closet full of skeletons and a mysterious drug addiction, and not the reason that the state says.
What he didn't lie for is because he was covering up the fact that he killed Maggie and Paul. That is not the reason he did it.
So now the jury is getting locked away in the room that you're looking at now, an exclusive that we are getting here at NBC News. This is what it looks like, right? These are the little details, the pens in that box. Sources telling our team that jurors could be there as late as 10 o'clock today and tomorrow. That's 10 p.m. Eastern time. A dramatic day with the jury, by the way, when one juror got removed for allegedly talking about the case, and she asked the court to go back to get the one key thing that she left in that room. Listen.
What do you have in there?
A dozen eggs.
Say it again?
A dozen eggs.
A dozen eggs. You get a lot of interesting things, but now a dozen eggs.
The drama doesn't end, folks. Danny Savalas is going to give us the legal explainer on all of this in a second, but I want to start on the ground in Walterboro, South Carolina. So, Ellison, we showed a little bit of those jury room pictures. Bring us inside, right? What happens now that the jury has this case?
Yeah, so they are in that room. We were in there this morning. I have said it a lot today, but I will say it again so you can just get a sense of what it feels like being in there. It is kind of a dreary room. There are windows, 4 of them, but the blinds are closed. A massive table in there with chairs around that table. Not a lot of room to relax. Not really a place that most people would look at and think, okay, I want to spend hours upon hours upon hours in this room. They do have snacks in there. They do have a private bathroom, but if they need anything, if If they have any questions, anything, they have to do a formal request. They cannot leave this room. We have heard repeatedly that they will be in there deliberating until 10 p.m. tonight. Right now, we're told, Hallie, there are no plans for a dinner break. That could, though, of course, change. We were told by court sources yesterday that the judge plans to have them deliberate until 10 p.m. tonight and tomorrow, if that is necessary. So, look, there are a few things to remember about South Carolina. If there's a scenario where the jury comes back and they say, hey, we are split, we are deadlocked, then you will see the judge say, go back, try again. If they come back again and say we are still deadlocked, then what happens in this state, which doesn't happen in every state, is they will give them an Allen charge, which has been described to me as basically a pep talk for the jury. It's based on a Supreme Court case where they say, you know, we chose you because you can do this. Go back, try again. And then it progresses, you know, from there. If they come back and say, no, 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 we are still split, then obviously you have a mistrial. We don't move forward there. But if he is found guilty, how it works in South Carolina is they would immediately go into a sentencing phase, and you would first hear victims have the opportunity to address the court, the defendant have the opportunity to address the court, and then an immediate sentencing. Hallie?
Wow. So over and over again, Ellison, one thing we heard from the defense, hammering this idea that there's not a motive. There's no, in their words, common sense for Murdaugh to have done this crime. We sort of gave a bit of the flavor of that as we were laying out at the introduction here, what the prosecution was saying, what the defense was saying.
Yeah, I mean, that was the crux of the defense's closing arguments today, is they were saying, yeah, they have told you he did this, but have they really answered why? Think about it. They said, would a rational person who was worried about financial crimes put themselves in the middle of a murder investigation? They said that the prosecution has not at all adequately answered why he would do this. Listen.
You've heard weeks testimony about Alex's financial crimes, drug addiction, and lies. But after all that, the state has failed to provide a satisfactory answer to this question. Why?
Hallie, I was speaking to someone who is a former prosecutor in this state earlier, and they were talking about the fact how the prosecution has centered pretty much the bulk of their case around the motive, even though they have other circumstantial evidence. And they said that that to them is a red flag. And I'm curious what Danny thinks on this, because they said motive matters if you have varying degrees of murder. But in the state of South Carolina, you don't. There's not first-degree murder. There's not second-degree murder. Murder is just murder. So they said the prosecution focusing their case on a motive, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you don't have varying degrees of murder. You didn't really need to do it. And the kennel video and other circumstantial evidence they felt were stronger. Hallie?
Ellison Barber live for us there in Walterboro, South Carolina, teeing up, of course, Danny Savallo. So, Danny, let me just have you jump in on that, right? This idea that the prosecution did focus on motive. There was other, as Ellison describes it, circumstantial evidence. I'm thinking of, for example, the prosecution laying out that casings from the gun that was used in the murder were found on the Murdaugh property a year or months prior, I should say. There were other things that came up over the course of this trial.
The prosecution made a mistake focusing on this financial crime motive, supposedly for Murdaugh killing his wife and son. That's not my opinion. It's evident from the prosecution's pivot away from this theory, not just really in their closing, but more so in their rebuttal. They must have access to social media just like we do, and the general consensus is, among people I've talked to, and you heard it from Ellison there as well, is that this is a hard motive to buy. And it's a misstep because it isn't necessary. The state doesn't need to prove motive. It's clear this was an intentional killing. The prosecution recognized this, and in this rebuttal, you saw them move away from it and instead say, and I'm paraphrasing, we don't need a motive. Sure, it might have been the financial crimes, but it could also just be that he's out of his mind. It could be anything. The motive is not something we have to prove. And look, I can't blame the prosecution for being overambitious. They have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And any prosecutor will tell you that creates an anxiety for them that, oh my goodness, what if I don't put in every piece of evidence I possibly can to win this case? So it's understandable they wanted this financial crime evidence, but it may come back to bite them. Case in point, the defense focused heavily on that. and really comparably less on some of the attacks on the prosecution's case in chief. They were given a gift by the prosecution, this unbelievable financial crime motive theory, and they hammered on it. And then, of course, they hammered on reasonable doubt, burden of proof, all of the classics that defense hammers on in closing.
Let me pull back. Let me give it the 30,000-foot view here, right? There's a reporter, Avery Wilkes, of the Post and Courier, who's been all over the story, who breaks down what is just the key central question. Because I don't care if you've been watching every minute of the Murdaugh trial. I don't care if you've watched 0 minutes and this is the first time you're hearing about it. This is the big picture view here, right? That Alex Murdaugh, and this is Avery Wilkes writing this, was a high-profile trial lawyer, a gregarious Hampton socialite, a part-time prosecutor, the heir to a low-country legal dynasty, and a con artist whose thefts brought that legacy crashing down. But was he also a murderer? And Danny, that is it, right? That is what this comes down to, that a jury will decide that. And the question, the bar they have to clear is beyond a reasonable doubt, right? This case is about circumstantial evidence versus direct evidence. The definition of what is reasonable doubt, is it all doubt? Is it some doubt? Here's how the judge summed it up in his charge to the jury.
To the extent the state relies on circumstantial evidence, the circumstances must be consistent with each other and, when taken together, point conclusively to the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt.
So put this in plain English for us as a defense attorney, right? Help us understand what's going through the mind of the jury when they hear something like that.
Leave it to jury instructions to take a concept and make it more complicated than it was when you first thought of it. What the prosecution really wanted to say, but couldn't, is that circumstantial evidence is often much more powerful than direct evidence. But they had to speak to the jury consistently with the written jury instructions, and those jury instructions equate circumstantial evidence with direct evidence. But we all know that direct evidence is unreliable. Eyewitness testimony is unreliable. And in a murder case, there usually is no direct evidence because all the eyewitnesses are no longer among the living. And that's why circumstantial evidence is incredibly powerful, more so in an era where our phones, as we've learned throughout this trial, are tracking our every movement. And through that, the prosecution can, and did in this case, build a compelling case that actually put the lie to one of the defense's theories, so much so that Murdaugh had to take the stand and explain away why his story was inconsistent with the hard data. And you know what that explanation was? Oh, I was lying.
I lied, right. Right. Danny Savalos, again, we are officially on verdict watch here. It would be, I think it's safe to say, very unlikely for it to come back now, right? I mean, 2 hours in, presumably they'll deliberate for a while longer, but we will see. Thank you. You don't think so?
You never know. You never know.
Okay, Danny, thank you. Hey, listen, we got to talk about some other big headlines, including right now the first warnings we are getting into us as we speak, actually, about the potential for a tornado outbreak down south. This is part of a major severe weather threat affecting millions of people. It looks like a gorgeous sunny day, right, in Dallas. There's a couple of clouds in the skyline, but here's the deal. There is a tornado watch in effect until 10 o'clock tonight. You've got airports already canceling more than 400 flights protectively out of DFW and Love Field. You've got 27 million people overall. Look at this region, right? You can see it stretches from Texas into Louisiana, a little bit into Alabama even. The potential for tornadoes, a lot of wind, a lot of hail, like baseball-sized hail. That is what people are bracing for, in addition to maybe a ton of rain, which could lead to flash flooding into tomorrow. We've got it covered for you tonight with NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. NBC News' Morgan Chesky is live for us in Dallas. Morgan, typically I'd start with you on the ground, but Bill, you are getting word now of the first of these tornado warnings coming in. What's happening?
Yeah, we had one about 5 minutes ago, and we just have a new one that was issued, too. This one up here right along the Red River near Denison. This storm has a history of huge hail. This is the first tornado warning with that. That's just across the Red River into southern portions of Oklahoma. Then there's the main line, and this is what will go through the Dallas area between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. local time. And this has a tornado warning just to the west side of Mineral Wells. And the thing with these storms is they're going to be flying. These storms are going to be moving at like 60 to 70 miles per hour, as fast as a car on the highway. So you're you're going to get these tornadoes warnings, and then these storms are going to race through in like 5 minutes, and then everyone's going to come outside and see what's left or see what damage has been done. So the tornado watch for the Dallas-Fort Worth area goes until 10 p.m. this evening. You just showed this image here. This is what we call the convective outlook. The Storm Prediction Center in Oklahoma, they're in charge of the whole country. They tell us what areas are most likely to see the highest concentration of severe weather. That's the area in red. Then below that is the orange and then the yellow. So anywhere in this region has a chance for strong storms. What we're especially concerned with, especially as we go through sunset into the evening, is strong tornadoes at night. And the risk for that is in the hatched area here. So that takes it from about where the storms are now through Dallas-Fort Worth. Tonight, probably right around 10 p.m., Texarkana to Shreveport, Little Rock up to areas or Memphis, probably 10 p.m. till about midnight. That's the timing for all this. So again, late night tornadoes are the most deadly. And then tomorrow we will see isolated tornadoes from Nashville to Lexington in areas of central Kentucky and also in Tennessee. So it'll be a two-day event. But today it looks like the chance for stronger storms. And then we're going to have a snowstorm out of this, too. Somewhere between Chicago and Detroit, someone's going to get a foot of heavy, wet snow, gusty winds, power is going to be knocked out. And then tomorrow night, we'll see that snowstorm moving into central and northern New England. That will be after the rush hour. So that's great, Hallie, for the timing on that one. And the final piece of this puzzle is flash flooding. You know, a lot of people don't even realize flash flooding kills more people in this country every year than tornadoes and hurricanes or any other type of weather disaster. So that includes 23 million people. So we have the dangers from tornadoes, huge hail, as you said, and also water from flash flooding.
Going to be a busy night, potentially. Bill Cairns, thank you. Let me bring in Morgan Chesky, who is live for us in Dallas. And Morgan, this is one of those incongruous moments where it looks like a, frankly, picture-perfect, almost spring day where you are, right? Sunny in Dallas. The concern is what's going to happen as night falls. As Bill has just laid out, I imagine a lot of folks are getting ready for that.
Yeah, Hallie, they've been getting ready for it. I can tell you, having spoken with several people in the Dallas area, this is not a storm that's going to be taking these people by surprise. Meteorologists here have been putting the word out for some time. They knew that there was going to be the possibility as early as a couple days ago. But now that we have that window pretty dialed in, at least for the Dallas area, that 5 to 7 to 8 p.m. around there, people are leaving work early, preparing at home. I spoke to one gentleman earlier who said he actually stocked up on supplies yesterday because in addition to the tornadoes, you have the threat of that significant hail that can be incredibly damaging here. So all eyes are going to be going to the skies here in just an hour or two. But you mentioned it. It's a blue sky, sunshine day here. As nice as it is when you do have the threat of severe weather like this, it almost kind of feels eerie and uncomfortable because you know what's to come here in just a short time. Hallie?
Morgan Chesky, live for us in Dallas. I know, friend, it's going to be a long night for you, too. Thank you for being there for us. Right as we were coming on the air, we found out that Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has just signed a bill that would restrict drag performances. This is the first law of its kind in the country, and we've covered it here on the show. We talked about it just a couple of days ago. Supporters of this law say it is needed to protect kids from adult cabaret that they see as inappropriate entertainment. It goes into effect April 1st. But critics say this law now a law, unfairly targets an art form associated with the LGBTQ+ community and broadly makes it seem like all drag is obscene and sexualized. Antonia Hilton is live for us now in Tennessee. Talk about the implications of this, because Tennessee may only be the first domino to fall on this idea.
That's right, Hallie. It's one of at least 14 states where legislation like this has advanced. But as you mentioned, it's the first state where this bill has now been signed and become law. It'll be going into effect the 1st of April. And it's caused a lot of controversy, not just here in Tennessee, but around the country. And in particular, some of the language in the bill, when you talk to civil rights attorneys or experts, there are concerns here that it is broad, that parts of it are vague. There's descriptions of adult cabaret performances of male and female impersonators and restricting them from performing in sexual ways in public or in any place where a person who is not an adult, in other words, a child, would be able to see them. And that's some of the language that has people concerned about what kinds of locations could someone argue a child might be able to see a performer, and who is going to police what constitutes a prurient or sexually suggestive act. Many people here have raised that children are allowed to go to restaurants like Hooters or see cheerleaders or dancers perform at football or basketball games, and that those are public and events that families are allowed to attend and haven't been restricted. So there's concern on the side of performers, of business owners who own restaurants that host events where drag queens perform, of what this is actually going to look like, how this law is now going to be implemented by law enforcement, by prosecutors in the future here. But as you mentioned, it's just the first here, and there's a wave of additional bills that may happen. I just spoke with the senator who authored this bill, and they're very aware that additional challenges are kind of centering around the First Amendment and protections around speech and performance and art are likely coming here. So this is, the first law to go into effect, but it's probably not the end of the fight here, Hallie.
And Tony Hilton, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Here in Washington, we're just learning the House Ethics Committee has new plans now to formally launch an investigation into George Santos. That's right. The saga with that controversial congressman continues. You've got now this committee looking at whether he broke the law with all the lies he told during his 2022 campaign, or if the congressman might have failed to give over the documents he needs to hand over in the House, or whether the congressman may have engaged in sexual misconduct. Remember, Santos has not told the truth about a lot of things. He even openly says that he's lied about stuff. His family's background, where he went to school, where he worked, even where his mother was on 9/11 or how she died. So what comes next? We don't know yet, right? The committee isn't saying much else publicly while they investigate. And the congressman's office, for its part, says he is going to be fully cooperating. Allie Vitale is joining us now from Capitol Hill. Okay, gut check us, Allie, here, right? It is not, I think, altogether unexpected that the House Ethics Committee would be taking this step, but it does still feel significant in what has been now a, weeks or even months-long drama over these Santos lies.
Yeah, it's been months of this, Hallie, and this is sort of the thing that we, I think, assumed was happening because we know that these complaints have been made. It's been widely talked about here on Capitol Hill, everything from potential campaign finance violations all the way to misconstrued or outright lies about his bio and his family and his background. So it's no secret that George Santos is mired in controversy. What's new, though, of course, is the way that this ethics committee is going to be handling it. What you typically have with an ethics committee here in Congress is 10 members, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, bipartisan in nature. What we learned today is that not only are they looking into Santos for all of those different things that you put up on the screen already, but they're doing it at a subcommittee level. So they've assigned now 4 lawmakers to this subcommittee to specifically focus on Santos for, again, everything on if he broke the law during the 2022 campaign, to campaign finance violations that he may have failed to disclose, to conflict of interest law potential violations, and then, of course, that allegation of sexual misconduct, that, of course, coming from a staffer who was trying to become an official staffer in Santos's congressional office, who made those allegations of sexual harassment and delivered a letter as well as posted some tweets about the experience that they say they had.
What could the outcomes be? Like, in other words, what's the penalty if they do investigate and find something, if not criminal, at least through the ethics committee, unethical had happened here?
Yeah, sort of depends which of these they end up proving to be true. And of course, the campaign finance ones are different than the sexual harassment ones in terms of the kinds of rebukes and consequences that could actually come from this. Look, the committee could decide that they want to just refer him for a slap on the wrist. Maybe there's a fine. They also could do something a little bit with more teeth, frankly, Hallie, which is to say they recommend he should be expelled from Congress. Now, that's like sort of the range here of what we're thinking about, but there's the immediate implication of what this committee does, and then the secondary implication of what this means for Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Because McCarthy has said, of course, if anything is found to be criminal, that's something they would revisit. He has also said that ethics needs to work its will on this. Clearly, that's happening. We're not going to get any updates on this throughout the process. They are notoriously secretive once they have an ethics violation that they are actively investigating. But for McCarthy, whatever this committee decides is going to force his hand. And remember why we're in this position even now, after all of these lies and allegations. It's because of the margins that the House Republicans have to keep the majority. That's not the outright explanation, but it's the real explanation for why McCarthy is trying to punt on this and letting this committee do the work that it needs to do. But eventually, there's going to be a push on this.
Allie Vitale live for us on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Allie, where we actually have some more breaking news here just coming into us tonight. A Democratic Senator, Dianne Feinstein, she is in the hospital, we are just learning. She's been hospitalized with shingles. Her office, in a statement, says the 89-year-old was diagnosed back in February. She's getting treated in San Francisco. She hopes to return to the Senate at some point this month. Keep in mind that Senator Feinstein is the oldest sitting senator. She is not running for re-election in 2024. Of course, this comes at a time when Democrats have just the slimmest of majorities in that chamber. We're obviously going to keep an eye on how the senator is doing. We're also learning tonight more about a plot to kill Jewish elected officials in Michigan, a plot that apparently included the state's attorney general, Dana Nessel. She's now revealing she was targeted by, in her words, a heavily armed man back in February. According to the criminal complaint from the FBI, a guy named Jack Carpenter tweeted he was going to Michigan to, I'm quoting, carry out the punishment of death to anybody who was Jewish in the Michigan government. This is the latest, right, of a lot of high-profile threats to government leaders we've been hearing a lot about lately. And it's coming at a time when anti-Semitic attacks are going up in this country. 2021, the highest year on record for those attacks. Ken Delanian joins us now. And Ken, this is a disturbing example of a, frankly, disturbing trend, as we just laid out here, of threats to government officials and threats to Jewish people specifically. Talk us through this.
That is exactly the right frame, Hallie, because taken alone, when I looked at this Twitter account, this is the ravings of a very disturbed person, right? But this guy was heavily armed. The police learned that he had handguns, a shotgun, military-style rifles, and what we're seeing is a climate in which mentally disturbed people are carrying out violence, hate-fueled violence, in this case, anti-Semitic violence, in other cases, anti-government or racist violence. And so I talked to FBI officials today who said, look, we're seeing a lot of this. It's really disturbing. We're on the lookout for it, but, you know, there's only so much we can do.
We're showing some of the numbers here, too, of just how much this has become an issue, this kind of thing, as you explain.
Yeah, I mean, this is the state where just in December, 3 men were sentenced to lengthy prison terms for trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
Gretchen Whitmer, yeah.
On the same day, they arrested and charged a man for threatening women and children outside a synagogue in Dearborn. Just a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles, 2 men were charged with hate crimes, firing at people outside leaving synagogues. So it's a contagion. You know, obviously anti-Semitism has always been with us, but the ADL says anti-Semitic incidents are surging.
I'm glad you're here to stay on top of it, to shine a light on it, Ken Delanian. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Coming up here on the show, a new meeting between the U.S. and Russia might have some real implications for Paul Whelan, that American and former Marine who's being wrongfully detained overseas. We'll tell you what the Secretary of State is revealing tonight. Plus, a newly unsealed search warrant. Now sharing more of what police found at the house of the Idaho quadruple murder suspect. That's coming up in the 5 Things. It's being called the biggest Christian revival this century, a get-together that started last month at a really small religious college in Kentucky, Asbury University, when a group of students finished up a chapel service in the school's auditorium and decided to keep the prayer going, and words spread and spread and spread online, and people came and they kept coming, thousands of them. Students and people in Kentucky and Christians from all around the country showing up on this campus to pray and to celebrate their religion and re-inspire their faith. That's the whole point of a revival, after all, right? We're talking as many as 70,000 people on campus, according to the school, over about 3 weeks in February. But now there's a new warning that the revivalists may have gotten more than what they came to Asbury for, with Kentucky health officials and the CDC sounding the alarm about a case of measles. Now, it's only one person so far who was there, along with 20,000 other peoples on one day of the revival. And normally, this wouldn't be a cause for that much alarm, even with how super infectious measles can be. That's because most people in this country are vaccinated against it. 90% of kids 2 or younger have gotten their shots. But the difference here is that some evangelicals, who made up a big part of that revival's crowd, can be skeptical of vaccines for religious reasons. Studies have found that as many as 40% of evangelicals are against most or all kinds of vaccinations. So that is why health officials are worried. There could be the potential for a bigger outbreak here. NBC's Dr. John Torres joins us now. Help us put this in perspective here, right? It's only one person. It is one person in a crowd of what the CDC says was about 20,000 people. Knowing what we know about this disease, how high is the risk of it spreading? What's the potential here?
And Hallie, measles, make no pretenses here. It's a dangerous disease. It's a deadly disease. And before vaccines, it was a killer of a lot of people in this country. And when it comes to measles, the biggest thing is how contagious it is. 90% of the people that come in contact with somebody with measles will end up getting it. On top of that, the measles vaccine, the virus itself can actually linger in the air for up to 2 hours after somebody who's with measles was in that area. And you can get it from breathing that contaminated air or touching those infected surfaces. And part of the issue is that infected people can end up spreading it 4 days before they start getting that rash, which is the biggest symptom we look for. The other thing is, if you look at the danger of measles here, 1 in 5 people end up hospitalized. 1 in 1,000 will end up with brain swelling, and 1 to 3 in 1,000 will end up dying from it. And those are adults. It's even worse in children. And so you can see this is a dangerous disease, and this is a deadly, very infectious disease.
What about this idea, right, of vaccine skepticism that we talked about that exists in these communities? Millions of people used to get the measles every year. Now, like last year, just over 100 were reported, right? There's obviously more of a handle on measles here, but there is also a broader context to put this in here.
And there definitely is a broader context. You can see the numbers there. Pre-vaccine, it was throughout the country. Epidemics of measles happen very often. And unfortunately, around 300 children ended up dying from it every year. And then once vaccines came along, measles was almost unheard of. And then it starts cropping up again in outbreaks in certain communities where vaccination rates are low. And so we can see, and that's the concern, is that because these vaccination rates are in pockets of areas where people are more susceptible to it, like in this one meeting they had here, then that can cause a spread of the measles, and it can not only spread from them, but it can spread to others in their communities as well once they end up going back to those communities.
Before vaccines, doctors used to see measles all the time before the vaccine in 1963. And I wonder if, I think this comes up every time there is a fairly significant measles outbreak, or in this instance, right, the potential for one. Obviously, you are a doctor, Dr. John. You learn about this in med school, but how often do, especially younger doctors, see cases of the measles? It's not that much.
And Hallie, this is a definite concern because measles, up until a few years ago, most doctors hadn't seen it and really wasn't on our radar when a patient came in. Once they start getting that rash, then yes, it's very typical of measles. And so, that's part of our training to look for something like that. But even before then, it's one of those things that as they start getting symptoms, they could get sore throat, they could get certain parts of their throat that look more inflamed that could be measles as well. They might not catch that early on, which means that they could go out in their community and spread it. And it's not just measles, it's other diseases as well they have vaccinations for that some doctors might not have seen, might not catch it right away, and eventually will, but at the same time they could be spreading throughout the community before they do.
Dr. John Torres, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, railroad workers in Greece, they are striking today after that deadly head-on train crash that killed 43 people. These workers are protesting poor working conditions, the lack of a more modern rail system. The country's transportation minister has already resigned over this whole thing. Number 2, in Israel, a crowdfunding campaign has raised more than $460,000 for Palestinians. Around 12,000 Israelis have donated to help people whose homes were damaged last week by Israeli extremists in the West Bank. The fund's organizer says he's also received threats calling him a traitor for starting the campaign. Number 3, new documents revealing more about what police took from the family home of the suspect in the University of Idaho quadruple murder case. Investigators found a black face mask, a Glock, a pocket knife when they arrested Brian Koberger in December. Police say that pistol may not have been used in the murders, but it could have DNA evidence or maybe even point to other unsolved crimes. Number 4, a new study is showing just how helpful a nice quick walk can be for older people. We already know that experts recommend walking at least 3,000 steps a day for folks over the age of 70. Well, now research suggests that every extra 500 steps could drop the risk of heart disease by 14%. Number 5, listen to this, another extraordinary miracle in Turkey. Look at this. That's rescuers pulling out a dog alive 23 days after that huge earthquake in Turkey. This little pup is Alex. He was found after somebody reported hearing noises under a building that collapsed. A Turkish news agency reports he's lost a lot of weight, but amazingly, Alex is doing okay. Coming up, we've got a first look at this new report card basically showing how bananas some of the working conditions are for players and their families in the world's richest sports league. The results of that survey of NFL players when we come back. For For the first time in more than a year, for the first time really since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began, we've got the top foreign policy guys from both the U.S. and Russia getting some FaceTime together. We saw Secretary of State Tony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit in India to talk about that war in Ukraine, to talk about the nuclear treaty Putin pulled out of, and importantly, what will happen to the American currently imprisoned in Russia, Paul Whelan. You probably will remember Whelan. That's him in the middle there. That's him you see on your screen. He's a former Marine who was arrested in Russia back in 2018. He's been imprisoned there ever since. The U.S. government says he's been wrongfully detained. American officials hoped that Whelan would be part of that trade in December for Brittany Griner, but the Russians said, hey, it's either Griner for Victor Bout, that convicted arms dealer, or no deal. At the time, you heard the U.S. say they would not give up on bringing Paul Whelan home. And Secretary Blinken is talking about that, apparently bringing it up in this 10-minute chat with Lavrov earlier today. Here he is on that moment.
I also raised the wrongful detention of Paul Whelan, as I have on many previous occasions. The United States has put forward a serious proposal. Moscow should accept it. We're determined to bring Paul and every other American citizen who's unjustly detained around the world home.
NBC's Josh Letterman is joining us now for more on this. So, Josh, you heard the secretary say there is a serious proposal that the U.S. has put forward. What are the details? What do we know about that? What's the reporting there?
Well, the hope, Hallie, ever since that Griner deal in December has been that maybe it broke the logjam, right? That it showed that the Russians were serious about prisoner swaps and that the U.S. could have these kinds of conversations with Russia, even as they are completely at odds over the Ukraine war and everything else. But really, since then, we haven't heard about any movement on Paul Whelan's case until today when Blinken mentioned that proposal. Now, the State Department says that today was not the first time the Russians heard about that proposal he mentioned, that the U.S. has been consistently pushing this proposal to the Russians for some time now. But if you remember, Hallie, from last year when those talks were underway for Whelan and Brittany Griner, the Russians were insisting that the U.S. release someone named Vadim Krasikov, who is a Russian who was tied to their intelligence, who was actually convicted in Germany of a political assassination. And at the time, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that was not really a serious proposal because Krasikov is not even in U.S. custody. He's in German custody. So Washington didn't even have him to give back. But listen to what Kirby had to say today about this U.S. proposal.
We want Mr. Whelan back. He belongs with his family, and that there is a proposal on the table. We want the Russians to take it. I really, for reasons I'm sure you can understand, I don't want to get into what the back and forth was on that or detail the conversations that we're still trying to have with the Russians about getting Mr. Whelan back.
Now, according to my reporting today, Hallie, there are no indications that the U.S. is revisiting this Krasikov idea or trying to get the Germans to give him up. That idea appears to be dead. But we do know that Russia, for some time now, has been insisting that a Whelan deal be a spy for a spy, because they, of course, claim that Paul Whelan is a spy, even though the U.S. strongly denies that. And so it's likely, although we can't say for sure, that whoever the U.S. has offered as part of this proposal is someone who is linked to Russian intelligence, who the Russians badly want back. But U.S. officials say the more they talk about this, Hallie, the less likely it is Paul Whelan is going to come home, and that's why they're so tight-lipped about this.
Josh Letterman live for us overseas with more on that. Josh, thank you. Coming up here on the show, there is a new shortage for a drug that a lot of kids need, and it looks like it could get even worse. What parents can do to get ready, especially if anyone in their family has asthma. Plus, police have somebody under arrest in connection with a bunch of bombings in California. What they're now revealing about the suspect, coming up in the local. Stay with us. We are getting the first ever report card from NFL players, giving us a never-before-seen and, frankly, kind of shocking look at some of the working conditions in the richest sports league in the world. And some of the allegations here that one team has rats in the locker room and players' wives having to breastfeed on the floor of public bathrooms. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another team, the Arizona Cardinals, apparently charges their own players to eat dinner at team facilities. Even players for the defending Super Bowl champions, the Chiefs, describe a culture of fear in reporting when they're hurt. All of it coming from a new survey from the Players Union, talking with 1,300 players over the last year. Now, all three of those teams you just mentioned, they're in the bottom 5 in this report card layout with a ton of D's and F's. The Washington Commanders, they were dead last. On the top of the screen, right, those are the top 5. Minnesota Vikings right there in first. The Eagles ranked 14th, by the way. Shaq Brewster is following this story for us from Atlanta. Shaq, walk us through more about these report cards, why the Players Union says they're so necessary, and some of the revelations that are coming out that we haven't really heard before.
Well, Hallie, the Players Union said this all came about because players express interest in having a guide, a team guide, essentially, especially when they're free agents. So to players shopping around for which team they want to join, this is a resource for them to be able to compare each team. And they went through, they interviewed about 1,300 players that participated in this survey, going through about 8 different categories, asking them about everything from how families are treated, the nutrition in their food. You see them there on the screen, the training room staff, and even some of their travel conditions. So all of that went into this survey. This is a statement that we got from the Players Association president explaining a little bit about this. They say if knowledge is really power, then providing players with information about each club would not only help them make important career decisions, but it would also help them raise the standards across each club. So some of the more revealing takeaways, you went through some of them, but some that I found interesting, the fact that some of the players get salaries docked, so they have to pay if they want to eat dinner, and some players, when they're on the road, they need to bunk up. So you have players actually sharing rooms when they're on the road ahead of games.
The timing is really interesting here because these report cards are coming out when all of these new prospects are at the NFL Combine. As we speak, they get drafted. They don't get to pick where they're going to get to go play, right? And when you look at some of these allegations, we laid them out right at the top there. Not just the rats in the locker room, but other stuff too. It's not like the NFL's broke. I mean, this is a league that is extremely profitable.
Yeah, Hallie, you know, when we talk about the NFL, more times we talk about we use the word billion instead of million. This is a very rich league. This is a league that brings in about $18 billion every year. They're on track to make that about $25 billion by the next couple of years. This is a league that you talk about TV contracts, $1 to $3 billion annually from network TV deals. There's no team in the NFL that's worth less than $3 billion. So a lot of money going around the NFL, and that's why some people are hoping that this causes some embarrassment. This is a statement that you got from the NFL via their comms office, and they write, we welcome the player feedback and look forward to reviewing the data from the NFLPA's poll. That's the Player Association's poll. And the rest of the statement goes on to suggest that they want to be part of the process for future surveys. But again, when you have that much money being spent in this league, there are questions about why the facilities, why the player conditions are not improved, Hallie.
It's also interesting, Shaq, when you look at this, because I think people might be thinking, okay, well, if a team is really good, like if a team is better, then is their quality of life better, right? And it seems like there's not a lot of correlation there, because you look at the Chiefs, who I regretfully know won the Super Bowl this year. They were in the bottom 5, for example. I'm not picking on the Chiefs. I'm just trying to make the point that, like, you know, there is not, it doesn't seem like there's a correlation.
I'm not getting there.
And Shaquille Brewster has lost our IFB.
That last question cut out right as you were asking. Right. I'm sorry. Little comms issue out here in the field. I see you talking, but I can't hear you.
Well, that's all right. We will come back to you on that point. I will just merely note it for the audience there as we get Shaq's tech issues figured out. Good luck to him. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Western Bureau, police in Fresno in California, so they've arrested a man suspected of several bombings in the area. They apparently started in December. Police released video. Look at this. This is one explosion at a county probation department. Oof. They said when they searched a place that was connected to this suspect, they found a lot of guns, ammo, meth, thousands of dollars in cash. The person's now facing federal and state charges. From our Southern Bureau, check out this body cam footage just in of police in Florida yanking out somebody who was trapped in his car, upside down, underwater. Look at this. This guy says he crashed into a canal after swerving. There was like an animal in the road, so he, spun his wheel to try to get out of the way of it. Sheriff's office officials say 911 dispatchers got alerted to the crash after the cell phone of this driver automatically sent out an SOS signal. Incredibly, he is expected to make a full recovery. He's in the hospital now. From our Northeast Bureau, ChatGPT coming up with the recipe for a brewery's latest beer in Massachusetts. This brewery also used AI to come up with a label and a name, AIPA. The brewery says after a couple of tweaks to the recipe, it became a big hit. But if a person is tweaking the bot's recipe, is it still the bot's recipe? Your philosophical conundrum to consider tonight. So listen, there's some new concerns today about a shortage of medicine that's about to get even worse. We're talking about something called Albuterol. It's used by hospitals and families to treat asthma in kids and RSV. It's also a component of inhalers. Like if you get prescribed an inhaler, there's probably Albuterol in it. And this is all because a manufacturing plant in Illinois has shut down just recently, leaving only one supplier in this country of liquid Albuterol. So far, hospitals have been managing. They've been managing this. They've been figuring out the issue. There hasn't been a real effect on patients. But the pharmacy director at one kids' hospital in Orlando says a shortage of generic drugs is a problem, telling the Washington Post, "This is the worst it's ever been in my nearly 20-year career." The FDA is looking into the bigger impact of this plant shutdown, saying they're looking at all the drugs affected by this closure and working with other manufacturers to understand the nationwide supply. Dr. Natalie Azar is joining us now. Full disclosure, Dr. Azar, like I have a kid who takes Albuterol for something that she has. How serious is this? Asking for a friend and for myself.
I know, Hallie, believe it or not, I think kind of almost everyone in my family is on Albuterol now too. My kids are also. After COVID, they both developed this exercise-induced bronchospasm. So my initial concern was just like yours. And I reached out to some pulmonology colleagues of mine and I said, how concerned are you about this? What are you telling patients? And they both said, wow, we really haven't heard about this. And I think that the reason why is that the shortage really is referring to the liquid Albuterol that's used. It's changed into a mist that's used in those nebulizers, which I think we all maybe might have seen once or twice, maybe on TV in the emergency room, for example. Kids who come in or anyone who comes in with asthma gets a nebulizer treatment of this Albuterol. Whether or not it's going to affect the inhalers that you take 2 puffs 30 minutes before exercise, at the moment, I don't think that's an issue. So I think that's reassuring for everyone. As my colleagues also mentioned, in the hospital, in that setting, if they don't have enough to put in a nebulizer, you can use an inhaler, and there are some alternatives that the docs can also use.
It sounds like this is, we're telling this story here on the news kind of on the early side, right? Because this plant shutdown, which just happened, I think, last week, is triggering concerns about a shortage, even though it's not like freak out level, no Motrin on the shelves level shortage yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Hallie, I think you're right. And I think there's really 2 stories here. One is that, if you are someone who, has asthma or bronchitis or COPD, and we're in respiratory illness season, you need to be aware of this. But I think the other story here is really just exposing how fragile the domestic supply of so many generics is, right? And about how there's such a little profit margin on these generics, so there aren't a lot of manufacturers. So when one goes down, there really is going to be a significant ripple effect, in that sector, in that market for that drug.
Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you for being on with us and for sharing your reporting with your pulmonology colleagues as well. Really appreciate it. Still to come here on the show. It's not even on the air yet, but there's this new HBO show with some pretty big stars that's getting a ton of attention, and not really for the best of reasons. Why it's being called disgustingly off the rails. Next. Some fairly serious allegations coming out tonight now about a celebrity-studded multi-million-dollar show that the creator of Euphoria, Sam Levinson, and The Weeknd, the pop star, are putting together called The Idol. Here's some context. HBO is marketing this upcoming show as, in their words, the sleaziest love story in all of Hollywood and one of the most provocative original programs. The show's still in production, and it had a big creative overhaul after the original director backed out last year. Well, now there is new reporting out from Rolling Stone alleging that behind the scenes, the show that isn't even out yet has kind of gone off the rails. Rolling Stone reports Sam Levinson scrapped the original project, added more disturbing sexual and violent scenes, and turned the plot into something some crew members tell Rolling Stone is degrading and offensive. Remember, this is the same guy who created Euphoria, a show centered around teen sex and drug use. The Weeknd, the pop star, kind of clapping back here to this Rolling Stone piece, sharing on Instagram what looks like a clip from the show where his character calls Rolling Stone, in his words, a little irrelevant. His team gave NBC News the official no comment. And HBO is telling us, in part, I'm quoting here, throughout the process, the creative team has been committed to creating a safe, collaborative, and mutually respectful working environment. Darren Karp from Bravo is here to help us all make sense of this. This is like everywhere, right? I mean, this is in a lot of group chats here, and there's multiple pieces, multiple layers to this, especially with some of these allegations here that are pretty serious that Rolling Stone is making.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking that this show hasn't even aired yet. We don't even have an air date for it. I mean, there's been so many teasers and trailers. I mean, talk about sometimes bad publicity is publicity for a show. This is kind of going off the rails in a disgusting way. It's hard to imagine something that could be darker and more insidious and more sexual than Euphoria, one of my favorite shows on TV. But apparently, you know, with Amy Simons, the original director, leaving and Sam Levinson taking in, The Weeknd has often said that, you know, Amy left because it was getting too much into the female perspective. So hard to say what the show is going to kind of be like, but there have been a ton of rumors about it being sort of torture porn in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, that's the headline, I think, of the Rolling Stone piece, the idea of how the next Euphoria became, in the words of some, you know, this idea of torture porn. You see it here. And listen, the show's creators say they are trying to be provocative. Like, this is intentionally provocative. Euphoria, which Sam Levinson also created, is provocative. That has also faced controversy here. And this Rolling Stone report, and to be clear, NBC News has not confirmed or independently verified anything from it, but they say it's having a real effect on some of the members of the production team, right? There's that piece of it, too, what people go through to put on shows like these.
Yeah, a lot of people have come forward anonymously, of course, to talk about how the culture of the show has really changed. It's really moved from sort of this satire of things they're making fun of in Hollywood and the music industry to actually being the thing that they were trying to satirize, that it's really gone off the rails in terms of the sexual scenes, what they wanted to film, again, with that female perspective, moving away from that, and it's sort of becoming this rape fantasy in a way, between The Weeknd and then the lead with Depp. So it's going to be, I think people are going to be curious about what's being seen here. I mean, Euphoria in and of itself has its own issues that have been kind of coming into season 3. So The Idol is really taking a turn in that direction that I think people are kind of turned off by, but also definitely want to tune into as well.
Darren Karp, thank you very much for that perspective and analysis. Appreciate it, as always. That does it for us for this hour. It is good to be with you, as always. We're going to have more for you here tomorrow. Same time, same place. Look forward to seeing you then. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.